The Hall of Nine Moons had been designed to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling floated 300 meters above the polished black floor, held in place by gravity anchors that hummed like distant thunder, while 9 artificial moons drifted beneath the dome in slow ceremonial orbit. Each moon projected the history of the Asterian Empire across the walls. Wars won, worlds conquered, treaties signed beneath the shadow of enormous starships. Princess Lyssara stood at the center of it all with her chin raised and her long, elegant ears angled slightly backward, the unmistakable posture of someone who had just insulted half the Imperial Council and remained disappointed by the other half. Her silver blonde hair fell over the shoulders of her white ceremonial armor, and the blue light of the moons caught in her eyes as she watched Lord Vale struggle to recover his dignity. "I merely said your defense proposal was ancient," she told him. "I did not say you were ancient, though now that you mention it, the resemblance is impressive." A few young officers coughed into their gloves. One of the floating moons flickered, perhaps out of embarrassment. Lord Vale's face darkened. "Your Highness, that proposal protected this empire before you were born." "So did stone walls," Lyssara replied. "We no longer hide behind those either." At the far end of the hall, Empress Seraphine remained seated upon the crystalline throne, her expression calm enough to frighten everyone who knew her. She shared her daughter's long ears and pale features, but where Lyssara wore pride like a blade, the Empress carried authority like gravity. "Enough," she said. The word traveled through the hall without amplification, yet every drone, advisor, guard, and counselor fell silent. Lyssara turned toward the throne with a smile that lasted precisely until she noticed the servant registry glowing above her mother's hand. "You have mistaken cruelty for strength," the Empress continued, "and arrogance for intelligence. I was defending the Empire from boredom. You were humiliating those who serve it." The registry expanded into a column of holographic names. Most belonged to palace attendants from allied species, selected for their discipline, education, and discretion. Near the bottom was a much smaller list marked human personnel. Quiet laughter passed through the nobles. Humanity had joined the wider interstellar community only 12 years earlier, and was still regarded by many as a species that had discovered faster than light travel, mostly by arguing with physics, until physics surrendered. "For one imperial cycle," said the Empress, "you will choose a personal attendant from this registry. Someone without title, influence, or noble blood. You will learn patience, respect, perhaps even gratitude." Lyssara stared at the names as though they were contagious. "This is absurd. It is punishment. Then it is very well designed." The hall remained silent, but the Empress's left eyebrow rose. Lyssara wisely turned back to the registry. She searched the human section and selected the least impressive file she could find. Ethan Ward, male, earthborn, palace maintenance assistant, no political connections, no recognized honors. His portrait showed a quiet man with dark hair, plain gray clothing, and an expression suggesting he had already heard the worst joke in the galaxy and was waiting patiently for the universe to apologize. "Him," Lyssara said. "An excellent choice," the Empress replied too quickly. That worried her. A side door opened, and Ethan entered under guard. He walked with no visible fear, though hundreds of nobles were studying him as if he were an unusual animal accidentally delivered to a banquet. He stopped before Lyssara and bowed, not too low, not too slowly, perfectly correct. "Your Highness?" His voice was calm. "You understand that you are to serve me personally?" she asked. "I was informed." "And you do not object?" Ethan glanced at the enormous hall, the drifting moons, the armed guards, and the Empress watching from her throne. "I considered filing a complaint," he said, "but the suggestion box appears heavily defended." One of the officers laughed aloud before pretending to choke. Lyssara narrowed her eyes. "You think this is amusing?" "Not yet. Ethan replied. But the day is young, the nobles whispered. The Empress concealed the beginning of a smile behind one hand. Lyssara stepped closer until only a breath separated them. She expected him to lower his gaze. He did not. His eyes were ordinary brown, but something in them unsettled her, an alertness too controlled for a servant, as though he had already counted every guard, measured every exit, and decided which artificial moon would fall first if the gravity anchors failed. Then the strange impression vanished, replaced by mild politeness. "Your first duty," she said, "is to carry my ceremonial cloak." Ethan looked at the silver fabric trailing behind her. "The one currently attached to you?" "Obviously." "I wanted to be certain. Human servants are still adapting to advanced alien technology." A second laugh escaped from the council benches. Lyssara removed the cloak and dropped it into his arms. The fabric contained reactive fibers and weighed nearly 20 kilograms when inactive. Ethan caught it without shifting his stance. For the briefest moment, his expression changed, not with effort, but recognition. His thumb brushed a tiny dark mark near the clasp. A burn no larger than a grain of dust. His gaze moved toward the upper balconies where maintenance drones hovered between the columns. One drone turned away a fraction too late. "Is there a problem?" Lyssara asked. Ethan folded the cloak carefully. "Probably not." "That is not an answer. It is the most popular answer in every palace I have ever seen." Before she could question him further, the ceremonial moons dimmed and the council resumed its formal session. Ethan followed 2 steps behind her, quiet once more. Above them, the suspicious drone slipped through a ventilation opening and disappeared into the hidden machinery of the palace. Ethan watched it go. Then he looked at the princess, at the nobles surrounding her, and at the almost invisible scorch mark near the cloak's neural clasp. Someone had tampered with it. Someone with access to royal systems. He said nothing. Princess Lyssara believed she had chosen the most ordinary human in the palace to complete her humiliation. By the time she reached her seat, Ethan had already identified 3 possible assassins, 2 compromised security routes, and 1 serious flaw in her personality. The assassins, he thought, would probably be easier to handle. By the 3rd morning of Ethan Ward's service, Princess Lyssara had decided that humans were either remarkably adaptable or too stubborn to recognize suffering. She had ordered him to reorganize her private library by the emotional stability of each author, polish a ceremonial combat spear that actively disliked being touched, and collect frost blossoms from the palace's upper atmosphere garden before sunrise. Ethan completed every task without complaint. The library now contained a section labeled Authors Who Should Have Rested Before Writing. The spear had stopped attempting to shock him, and the frost blossoms arrived arranged around a cup of hot earth coffee. "You were not instructed to bring this," Lyssara said, studying the dark liquid suspiciously. "No," Ethan replied. "But you were instructed by your physician to become less hostile before breakfast." Her long ears rose sharply. "My physician discusses my health with servants? Your physician discusses it with everyone. Yesterday she warned a cleaning drone." The drone beside the window emitted a soft, confirming beep. Lyssara glared at it until it rolled away. She lifted the cup, sniffed the unfamiliar aroma, and took a cautious sip. Her expression remained perfectly royal, but Ethan saw her shoulders relax. "Acceptable," she said. "That is the highest honor Earth Coffee has received since it prevented 3 wars and caused 2 others." Their routine continued through corridors of transparent metal and gardens where silver trees grew upside down beneath controlled gravity fields. Lyssara invented increasingly unreasonable tasks, and Ethan completed them with such calm efficiency that the palace staff began placing private bets on which of them would lose patience first. Ethan suspected the maintenance workers favored him. Lyssara suspected everyone favored him, which made her assign more tasks. Yet beneath the absurd demands, Ethan watched the palace change around them. Security drones appeared in corridors where none had been scheduled. Door sensors paused before recognizing royal clearance. Twice he noticed guards wearing the correct uniforms but carrying pulse rifles from an older military series. Small errors, carefully placed, like cracks beneath fresh paint. During the Festival of Radiant Suns, the royal family gathered in the Sky Pavilion, a vast platform suspended above the capital by magnetic columns. Thousands of citizens filled the terraces below while holographic star beasts soared through the air, dissolving into showers of golden light. Lyssara stood at the balcony in a gown woven from responsive crystal, her long ears decorated with thin silver chains. Ethan remained behind her, holding a ceremonial case containing the crown of succession. "Try not to drop it," she said. "I would hate for the Empire to lose its future because your hands became tired." "I've been carrying your schedule for 3 days," Ethan said. "The crown feels light." She glanced back with a warning look, but the corner of her mouth moved. Then Ethan heard a sound beneath the music, a faint mechanical click from the magnetic support grid. His eyes shifted toward the western column. One stabilizer light changed from green to blue, then vanished entirely. The pavilion tilted less than a degree. Nobody else noticed. Ethan stepped closer to Lyssara. "Your Highness, move away from the balcony." "Why?" "Because I am asking politely." "That is not a royal command." A second stabilizer failed. The floor lurched. Guests cried out as crystal tables slid toward the open edge. Above them, the holographic star beasts flickered into distorted shapes. Lyssara reached for the railing, but Ethan seized her around the waist and pulled her backward, just as the entire balcony section collapsed into empty air. The crowd below screamed. Ethan threw the crown case onto the floor, struck its emergency release, and ripped the anti-gravity lining from inside. He wrapped it around Lyssara and activated the field. The device expanded in a burst of blue light, lifting them inches above the falling platform as metal and crystal plunged toward the city. "That case is sacred!" Lyssara shouted. "Then it should be pleased to save a princess." Ethan kicked away from the broken balcony and guided them toward the remaining floor. A decorative solar projector exploded nearby, sending burning fragments across the pavilion. He turned his body, shielding Lyssara as the anti-gravity field carried them through the smoke. They landed hard beside a support arch just before emergency systems restored balance. Imperial guards rushed toward them. Lyssara pushed herself upright, breathless and furious. The stabilizers failed. "2 of them," Ethan said, "at exactly the same time." Chief Guard Merrick approached, his armored face pale. "A systems malfunction, Your Highness. We will investigate." Ethan looked past him toward a technician standing near the western control panel. The technician's gloves were spotless despite the smoke, and a small transmitter pulsed beneath his sleeve. Their eyes met. The man turned and ran. Ethan handed Lyssara to the nearest guard and started after him. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "To ask a maintenance question." "You are a servant, not an investigator." Ethan glanced back. "Today I am both. The palace seems understaffed." He disappeared into the crowd before she could stop him. Lyssara stared after him, then looked down at the torn anti-gravity lining still wrapped around her shoulders. The quiet human had recognized the danger before trained security officers, destroyed a priceless royal artifact without hesitation, and moved through collapsing metal as though falling structures were an inconvenience he had encountered many times before. Chief Guard Marek continued explaining how accidental failures could occur in ancient magnetic systems. Lyssara barely listened. The Sky Pavilion was less than 40 years old, and Ethan Ward, palace servant, had just lied to her with the confidence of a man who already knew the truth. Ethan caught the fleeing technician 3 corridors below the Sky Pavilion, although caught suggested a chase dramatic enough to impress witnesses. In truth, the man ran through a service door, turned into a maintenance shaft, and discovered Ethan already waiting beside the emergency ladder. You took the scenic route, Ethan said. The technician raised a compact pulse pistol. Ethan sighed. And you brought a souvenir. The weapon fired once. Ethan moved before the blue bolt left the barrel, twisting aside as it scorched a line across the wall. He caught the technician's wrist, struck a nerve beneath the elbow, and lowered him to the floor with the calm efficiency of someone putting away an inconvenient piece of furniture. The entire exchange lasted less than 2 seconds. By the time Imperial guards arrived, Ethan was kneeling beside the unconscious man and examining the transmitter hidden beneath his sleeve. He slipped, Ethan explained. Chief Guard Merrick stared at the burn mark on the wall, the disabled weapon, and the technician lying face down with both arms locked behind him by his own belt. Several times. The floor is dangerous. Princess Lyssara arrived moments later, still wearing the torn anti-gravity lining over her crystal gown. Her long ears were angled forward, a sign Ethan had learned meant she was furious, curious, or both. You disobeyed a direct order, she said. You did not give me one. I told you not to go. That sounded emotional rather than official. Her eyes narrowed. You are becoming remarkably skilled at irritating royalty. I practice whenever possible. The captured technician was taken to a secure interrogation chamber, but before he could speak, a microscopic machine hidden in his bloodstream activated. Silver veins flashed beneath his skin, his body stiffened, and every memory center in his brain was erased by a burst of engineered radiation. He survived, but his identity vanished along with the conspiracy's secrets. Lyssara watched through the transparent barrier as medical drones worked over him. Memory poison, she whispered. Forbidden even in war. Ethan studied the dead transmitter. Then whoever hired him does not expect to lose. The attack forced the royal court to leave the capital while security systems were examined. Lyssara was sent to Vera, an ocean world whose cities floated inside enormous transparent spheres beneath violet seas. She objected until the Empress reminded her that remaining alive was not an optional royal duty. Ethan accompanied her aboard the Imperial cruiser, Dawn Spear. Lyssara spent most of the journey pretending not to study him. He sat across the cabin repairing the damaged crown case with a small magnetic tool, his hands steady despite the ship vibrating through folded space. You handled that weapon too easily, she finally said. It had a simple trigger. You avoided the shot before it was fired. The technician had poor aim. He had not fired yet. Ethan looked up. Then I was fortunate. Fortune does not disarm armed men and tie them up with their own clothing. You would be surprised what fortune does when properly motivated. She leaned closer. Who are you? Your servant. That answer becomes less convincing every time you say it. Before Ethan could respond, the cruiser dropped violently from folded space. Warning lights flooded the cabin red. A deep metallic impact rolled through the ship, followed by the voice of the navigation intelligence announcing that 3 unidentified vessels had attached themselves to the outer hull. The lights died. Emergency strips illuminated Lyssara's face in pale blue. Pirates? She asked. Ethan stood and removed his plain servant coat. Beneath it, he wore only a dark shirt, but his posture changed so completely that the room seemed smaller around him. Pirates usually introduce themselves. They enjoy branding. A second impact shook the vessel. From beyond the cabin door came the sound of pulse fire and a guard shouting before communication cut off. Ethan opened a maintenance panel, removed 2 narrow power cells, and connected them to the broken ceremonial spear Lyssara had made him polish days earlier. Its blade awakened with a low white glow. You repaired that? She asked. It apologized. It cannot speak. That explains why the apology was so sincere. The door exploded inward. 2 armored attackers rushed through the smoke, their faces hidden behind mirrored helmets. Ethan stepped between them with frightening speed. The spear moved once, striking the first attacker's rifle aside, then reversed into the second man's chest plate, hard enough to disable the armor. Ethan caught the first by the shoulder and used his momentum to throw him into the wall. The second tried to rise. Lyssara grabbed a fallen pulse weapon and aimed it at his helmet. "Do not move," she said. The attacker froze. Ethan looked at her grip. "Safety is still on." She glanced down. The attacker lunged. Lyssara struck him across the helmet with the weapon instead. He collapsed. "I knew that," she said. "Of course." They moved through the cruiser together, passing shattered drones and sealed compartments while the ship's artificial intelligence struggled against a foreign virus. Ethan seemed to know every military corridor before seeing it. He identified ambush points, bypassed locked doors, and guided Lyssara through maintenance passages too narrow for armored soldiers. At one junction, they found the remaining royal guards trapped behind a force barrier, while 6 attackers advanced toward the bridge. Ethan studied the corridor for 3 seconds. "Stay here." Lyssara lifted the pulse rifle. "Absolutely not." That was an order. "You are my servant." Then consider it an aggressively phrased suggestion. She followed him anyway. Together they entered the bridge from opposite sides. Ethan disabled weapons and armor with precise strikes, while Lyssara fired controlled bursts that forced the attackers away from the navigation core. When the last soldier fell, the ship's captain stared at Ethan as though seeing a ghost. "That combat pattern," he said quietly. "Where did you learn it?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Earth." The captain shook his head. "No, I saw it once during the siege of Kairos. Only one human unit fought that way." Silence settled over the damaged bridge. Lyssara looked at Ethan, but he turned toward the tactical display before she could question him. Outside, the enemy vessels detached and vanished into folded space. On the screen, one final message appeared in an unknown military cipher. Ethan read it instantly. His face became still. "What does it say?" Lyssara asked. He erased the message. "That they know I am with you." For the first time since choosing him, the princess understood that the danger surrounding her had not only found a protector, it had recognized him. The ocean above Vera's capital pressed against the city's transparent dome like a living sky. Vast silver creatures drifted through the violet water, their luminous fins casting slow waves of light across the streets below, while transport pods moved between towers along invisible magnetic lanes. Princess Lyssara should have found the view calming. Instead, she stood in the guest palace with her arms folded, watching Ethan examine every entrance, window, ventilation grill, and decorative fountain as though one of them might confess. "You have inspected that statue 3 times, she said. "It has not moved. That is what makes it suspicious." The statue, carved in the shape of Vera's first aquatic ruler, released a small stream of bubbles from its mouth. Lyssara's long ears twitched. "You are enjoying this." "I am trying to remain professional." "You called the fountain an accomplice." "It has access to every room through the water system." She stared at him for a moment, then looked at the fountain with slightly less confidence. After the attack aboard the Dawn Spear, Ethan had become impossible to dismiss as an ordinary servant. The ship's captain had refused to explain the combat pattern he recognized, claiming the records were sealed above royal clearance. That answer had offended Lyssara so deeply that she had spent the entire descent to Vera requesting access to files she had previously never known existed. Every request was denied. Ethan, meanwhile, had returned to carrying her cloak and correcting her schedule, as if he had not dismantled an armed boarding squad with a ceremonial spear. Their first diplomatic meeting took place in the Pearl Chamber, where Veran ministers floated inside columns of oxygenated water, while land dwellers sat around a circular table. The governor, a transparent-skinned elder named Solon, welcomed Lyssara with elaborate respect. Halfway through his speech, Ethan noticed a diplomatic drone serving drinks to the wrong species. He reached across the table and took Lyssara's glass just before she drank. "That was mine," she said. "It contains concentrated chelate enzyme. And it dissolves mammalian nerve tissue." Solon's skin flashed bright green with alarm. The drone rotated toward Ethan, projected a cheerful service symbol, and attempted to retreat. Ethan caught it by one mechanical arm. "It appears the refreshments are hostile." Lyssara rose slowly. "Is everything in this galaxy trying to kill me?" "Not everything," Ethan said. "The statue is still undecided." The drone's shell cracked open before guards could scan it, releasing a cloud of microscopic machines. Ethan swept the table's emergency shield generator into the air and activated it. A curved field snapped around the cloud, trapping the machines as they struck the barrier with tiny flashes of blue. Solon ordered the chamber sealed. His ministers fled into their water columns, while Lyssara watched the swarm form symbols against the shield. One shape appeared again and again. A broken crown. "The same faction?" she asked. "Probably." Ethan studied the machines more closely. These were built with imperial fabrication codes. The words changed the room. Varen's sabotage could have been blamed on an outside enemy. Imperial codes meant someone within Lyssara's own government had supplied the assassins. That night, Ethan left the palace without permission. Lyssara followed him without admitting she was following. He moved through Vera's lower districts, where old tunnels curved beneath the sea dome, and black market stalls sold illegal memory crystals, cloned identities, and pets that occasionally became invisible. Lyssara wore a hooded cloak, though her long ears kept pushing against the fabric. "You are very bad at being unnoticed," Ethan said without turning. She stopped. "How long have you known?" "Since you threatened the lift operator for asking which floor you wanted." He was impertinent. He was 12. Age does not excuse poor service. Ethan led her into an abandoned transit station, where the walls were covered in glowing algae. At the far platform stood 3 figures wearing dark pressure armor. One held a case marked with the same broken crown symbol. "Stay behind me," Ethan whispered. "You say that often. You ignore it often. Then perhaps improve your strategy." The figures opened fire. Ethan shoved her behind a support column as red energy bolts cut through the darkness. He rolled across the platform, fired twice with a stolen pulse pistol, and shattered the attackers' helmet sensors without killing them. Lyssara leaned from cover and struck a control panel with her palm. The station's old gravity system reversed. 2 attackers rose helplessly into the air, colliding with the ceiling. The third activated magnetic boots and charged Ethan with a plasma blade. Ethan blocked the strike using a metal maintenance rod, twisted beneath the glowing weapon, and drove his shoulder into the attacker's chest. The man's helmet broke against the wall. Beneath it was Commander Jarek, one of the senior officers assigned to protect the royal family. Lyssara went still. "You stood beside my mother's throne." Jarek laughed through bloodied teeth, "and heard every plan the Empire made." Ethan opened the case. Inside lay route maps, security codes, and a list of royal officials marked for death. At the bottom was Ethan's name, followed by a military designation Lyssara had never seen. Ward, Ethan, Terran Ghost Command. Priority, Omega. "What does that mean?" she asked. Jarek's smile vanished. "It means your servant is the reason entire fleets learn to fear humans." Ethan shut the case. "He is trying to frighten you." "He is succeeding," Lyssara said quietly. Jarek reached for a hidden device in his armor. Ethan seized his wrist, but not before a signal escaped into the station's old network. Across the tunnel, hundreds of dead screens flickered to life. A masked figure appeared on everyone. "At last," the voice said, distorted by layers of encryption. "The ghost of Earth has returned." Ethan's face lost all humor. The figure continued. Protect the princess if you wish. When the empire falls, she will learn what you truly are. The screens went dark. For several seconds, only the distant groan of the ocean pressing against the city dome could be heard. Lyssara looked at Ethan, not as a servant, but as a stranger wearing a familiar face. You will tell me everything. Ethan picked up the case and glanced toward the tunnel where enemy reinforcements were already approaching. I will tell you enough to keep us alive. She raised her weapon. That answer is unacceptable. Then survive long enough to complain properly. The first armored soldiers appeared at the far end of the station. Lyssara stepped beside him, ears angled forward, pulse rifle ready. You truly are the most irritating punishment my mother has ever invented. Ethan gave her the faintest smile. And yet, you keep following me. They escaped the abandoned transit station through a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for Ethan's shoulders. Above them, the ocean groaned against the city dome, and every few seconds the metal walls trembled beneath the pressure. Lyssara moved behind him with one hand on her pulse rifle and the other holding her cloak away from the oily pipes. Royal architecture has spoiled me, she muttered. I had noticed, Ethan said. You nearly declared war on a lift. The lift was disrespectful. It stopped at every floor. Exactly. Behind them, armored boots struck the tunnel entrance. Red targeting beams swept across the darkness. Ethan reached a junction box, tore open the panel, and crossed two glowing cables. The tunnel lights died. A second later, the floor's magnetic maintenance grid activated at full strength. Their pursuers slammed face first onto the metal surface, weapons and armor pinned beneath them. Will that hold them? Lyssara asked. Until someone remembers they have emergency releases. How long? Judging by their entrance, several minutes. They emerged inside an old oceanic research vault beneath the diplomatic district. Rows of dormant consoles lined the circular chamber, while preserved alien organisms floated in glass cylinders around a central archive core. One creature opened 6 yellow eyes as Lyssara passed. Do not touch anything, Ethan warned. I was not going to. That one eats electrical signals. And your jewelry is connected to the palace network. Lyssara stepped away from the cylinder. This planet needs fewer decorative predators. Ethan placed Commander Jarek's stolen data case against the archive core. The system resisted at first, demanding Veyran genetic authorization, but Ethan bypassed it using 3 military codes and a sequence of symbols Lyssara recognized from ancient Imperial intelligence protocols. Her suspicion hardened. Those codes were abandoned before humanity joined the Empire. Officially, you always have an answer. Only when you ask the wrong question. The archive awakened. Holographic records filled the chamber. Battle maps, erased troop movements, and fragmented reports from conflicts the Imperial Council had never acknowledged. Then a human face appeared above the console. Younger, harder, with blood across one cheek and black combat armor marked by a silver Earth insignia. Lyssara turned slowly toward Ethan. You looked less tired. I had fewer responsibilities. The recording showed him leading a small Terran unit through the burning corridors of a colossal enemy carrier. Around them, alien soldiers fell beneath precise gunfire, while entire decks collapsed into space. A title formed beneath the image. Project Ghostlight. Commander Ethan Ward. Status: deceased. Lyssara read the final word twice. You died. It was inconvenient. That is your explanation? The full version contains paperwork. Further records revealed the truth. Years before Earth publicly entered interstellar society, a hidden coalition had approached humanity during a border war against the Kar Dominion. Ethan's unit had been sent as deniable soldiers into battles no government wished to claim. They sabotaged fleets, rescued occupied worlds, and ended the siege of Kairos by boarding the enemy flagship with only 11 people. 2 returned. Ethan disappeared soon afterward. The archive displayed casualty images, destroyed cities, and the names of soldiers beside the word lost. Ethan looked away before Lyssara did. "Why hide?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Because victory made politicians curious. They wanted more soldiers like us, faster, stronger, easier to control. And you refused. I destroyed the program. Then became a palace servant?" He leaned against the console. Palaces are quieter than battlefields. A distant explosion shook dust from the ceiling. Ethan glanced upward. "Usually." Lyssara studied him in the dim blue light. For the first time she understood that his calmness was not emptiness. It was restraint built over wounds no medical machine could close. "You should have told me. You would have treated me differently." "I am treating you differently now." "Yes. You have stopped ordering me to polish hostile furniture. The spear liked you eventually." "The spear tried to remove my hand." Before she could answer, the archive flashed a new file recovered from Jarek's case. A list of conspirators appeared, including ministers, generals, and royal officials. At the center of the network stood a name Lyssara knew well, Chancellor Veyron, her mother's oldest advisor. Beneath his profile was a schedule for the coming celestial coronation, where the entire royal family would appear before billions. The final instruction read, "Terminate bloodline. Transfer throne control." Lyssara's long ears lowered. "He taught me statecraft when I was a child. Then he knows your habits. He knows my mother's security. And now he knows I am alive." The archive suddenly emitted a piercing tone. The data case began to glow from within. Ethan grabbed Lyssara and threw them behind the central console as the case exploded into a swarm of razor-thin drones. They cut through the chamber in silver spirals, slicing glass cylinders and releasing water across the floor. The six-eyed creature escaped its tank, swallowed one drone in midair, and flickered out of sight. "You said it ate electrical signals," Lyssara shouted. "I did. You failed to mention it was useful. I am learning not to judge by appearances." She looked at him despite the chaos. "Was that a joke about me? This is not the time." Together they fired into the swarm while Ethan redirected the archive's shielding system. Blue barriers closed around the remaining drones and crushed them against the ceiling. When silence returned, Lyssara stood among broken glass, her hair damp, her armor scorched, and her dignity badly injured. The invisible creature made a satisfied chirping sound somewhere near her boots. "Do not laugh," she warned. Ethan's mouth remained perfectly still. "I would never." "Your eyes are laughing. They are poorly disciplined." She stepped closer, close enough to see the old scar beneath his jaw. "When this is over, Commander Ward, you will answer every question I ask. Every reasonable question. I am a princess. I decide what is reasonable. That explains several laws." Another explosion sounded above, followed by the citywide emergency sirens. On the chamber wall, a tactical display showed hostile ships descending through Vera's atmosphere. The conspiracy was no longer hiding. Lyssara lifted her rifle and looked at the man she had once chosen to humiliate. "Can you get us back to the capital before the coronation?" Ethan watched the approaching fleet, and something cold and familiar entered his eyes. "Yes." "Can you stop them?" He picked up Jarek's surviving data crystal and placed it in his pocket. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether they remember why they called me a ghost." The capital world appeared beneath them as a sphere of silver cities and burning defense platforms. Ethan had stolen a Veyron courier ship, persuaded its navigation intelligence that royal survival outranked docking regulations, and crossed 3 restricted jump corridors before the machine finally stopped protesting. "For the record," the intelligence said as they entered orbit, "this flight violates 47 interstellar laws." Ethan adjusted the controls. "Only 47? I have not finished calculating." Lyssara sat beside him in borrowed combat armor, her silver blonde hair tied behind her long ears. "Ignore it. Machines become dramatic when given personalities." "I heard that," the ship replied. The Imperial capital was already under attack. Black warships hung above the atmosphere like blades, releasing squadrons of drones toward the palace district. Defense satellites fired brilliant white beams across the darkness, but several had turned against their own fleet. Chancellor Veyron's conspiracy had infected the command network from within. "The coronation began 20 minutes ago," Lyssara said, reading the tactical display. "My mother will still be in the Hall of 9 Moons." Ethan guided the courier beneath the wreckage of a cruiser. "Then that is where Veyron will strike. The palace shields are sealed." "Good. How is that good?" "It means the traitors are trapped inside with us once we enter." She looked at him. "You have an unusual understanding of good news." The courier plunged through the atmosphere, shaking as enemy fire tore past its wings. Ethan flew between towers, skimmed across magnetic transport lanes, and landed on a palace balcony that had never been designed for spacecraft. The ship struck a ceremonial fountain, spun once, and stopped against a marble pillar. Water rained across the cabin. Lyssara unfastened her harness. Was that necessary? The fountain looked suspicious. The ship's intelligence sighed. "I am requesting reassignment." The palace corridors were filled with smoke, shattered drones, and guards fighting one another beneath emergency lights. Ethan accessed a wall terminal and discovered that Veyron had divided the loyal forces by issuing false orders through cloned royal signatures. He opened a palace-wide channel. "This is Commander Ethan Ward, Terran Ghost Command. All loyal units disengage from internal frequencies and switch to manual verification." Silence followed. Then an old general answered, his voice trembling. "Ghost Command was destroyed." "Yes," Ethan said. "We found it inconvenient." One by one, loyal officers acknowledged him. The legend of Kairos moved faster than any official command. Soldiers who had never met Ethan began following his instructions because their commanders had once whispered his name in training halls. He redirected defense squads, sealed traitor-controlled sectors, and turned maintenance drones into moving shield generators. Lyssara fought beside him, firing with disciplined accuracy, while using her royal authorization to override compromised systems. At the Hall of 9 Moons, they found Veyron waiting before the throne. The artificial moons above had stopped orbiting. Each now projected the broken crown symbol across the walls. Empress Seraphine stood surrounded by traitor guards, her hands bound inside a suppression field. "My dear princess," Veyron said, "you returned just in time to watch your empire become sensible." Lyssara raised her rifle. "You tried to poison me, drop me from the sky, and destroy my ship. Politics requires persistence." Ethan stepped forward. "No, politics requires speeches. This is just murder with expensive clothing." Veyron's smile vanished. Hidden panels opened along the hall, releasing armored assassins. Ethan moved before the first shot. He overturned a council table, using its gravity core as a shield, then fired through the transparent surface with a stolen pulse weapon. Lyssara activated the floor controls, reversing gravity beneath the Western squad. Soldiers rose helplessly toward the ceiling, while one shouted something unroyal. "Language!" Lyssara called. "You are in the presence of the Empress." Ethan almost smiled as he crossed the hall under fire. 2 assassins charged him with plasma blades. He trapped one weapon between the halves of a broken ceremonial staff, twisted it free, and drove the second attacker into a projection column. Above them, an artificial moon flickered and resumed orbit, striking 3 floating traitors with surprising dignity. Veyron retreated toward the throne and activated a device hidden beneath his robe. The palace shields began collapsing inward, converting their energy into a focused blast aimed at the royal district. "If I cannot rule the empire," he said, "there will be no empire left to inherit." Ethan glanced at the countdown. 40 seconds. The controls were linked directly to Veyron's neural implant. Killing him would trigger immediate detonation. Lyssara lowered her rifle. "What do we do?" "Keep him talking." "About what?" "He seems fond of himself." Lyssara stepped forward. "You always hated that my mother trusted me more than you." Veyron laughed. "She trusted you because you were her daughter, not because you deserved it." While he spoke, Ethan slipped behind the damaged council platform and connected Jarek's data crystal to the gravity network. The crystal carried Veyron's own command codes. He rerouted the collapsing shield energy upward, toward the traitor fleet in orbit. The countdown reached 3. Veyron realized, too late. "What have you done?" Ethan looked up as white light flooded the windows. "Improved the coronation." The palace shields erupted into the sky. A column of energy pierced the atmosphere and struck the enemy flagship, disabling its engines and spreading through the linked fleet. Across the capital, traitor ships fell silent. Loyal forces surrounded the hall. Veyron stared at the ruined tactical display while the Empress's guards freed her from the suppression field. Lyssara approached Ethan through drifting smoke. His sleeve was burned, blood darkened one side of his shirt, and he looked more tired than triumphant. "You saved the Empire," she said. "We saved it. You redirected a planetary shield through an enemy command network. You distracted him by insulting his personality, your strongest diplomatic skill." She should have been offended. Instead, she laughed, softly at first, then without restraint. Around them, exhausted soldiers began laughing too, the sound strange and human beneath the restored orbit of the 9 moons. Empress Seraphine watched her daughter stand beside the servant she had once chosen as punishment. Ethan looked toward the shattered doors, already searching for the next threat. Lyssara reached for his hand before he could move away. "Stay," she said. It was not a royal command. For the first time, Ethan understood that she did not need a servant, a legend, or a weapon. She needed him. And this time, he did not pretend to misunderstand. 3 weeks after the failed coup, the Hall of 9 Moons no longer looked like a monument to imperial perfection. One projection column remained cracked, 2 artificial moons moved with a faint mechanical wobble, and the council table Ethan had used as a shield now carried a polished silver plaque reading, "Damaged in defense of the Empire." Lord Viel had suggested replacing it. Princess Lyssara had refused. She said the scorch marks improved its personality. The surviving conspirators had been arrested across 12 worlds. Commander Jarek, unable to activate the memory poison a second time, had surrendered the names of Veyron's hidden supporters in exchange for exile rather than execution. The enemy admirals who had backed the coup accepted peace after discovering that their command network now answered to an Earth program Ethan had buried inside it during the battle. Whenever they attempted to launch a weapon, every screen on their ships displayed the same message: "Please reconsider your life choices." Lyssara had written that part herself. She stood beneath the restored moons in dark silver armor, not the fragile ceremonial crystal she once preferred. Her long ears were decorated with simple chains rather than royal jewels, and her silver blonde hair had been braided behind her shoulders. Before her waited the Imperial Council, the commanders of the loyal fleet, ambassadors from Earth and Vera, and thousands of citizens watching through holographic transmissions across the Empire. Ethan stood at the edge of the hall in a formal black uniform that had been found inside a sealed Terran archive. The silver insignia of Ghost Command rested over his heart. He disliked the uniform, the ceremony, and the fact that 4 palace attendants had argued for an hour about the correct angle of his collar. "You look uncomfortable," Lyssara said as she approached him. "I have survived orbital bombardments with fewer people adjusting my clothing. That explains why your collar was crooked." It was tactically crooked. Her smile came easily now. Months earlier, she would have hidden it as a weakness. Now she allowed the entire hall to see. Empress Seraphine rose from the crystalline throne. "Ethan Ward, step forward." He obeyed, though his expression suggested he would rather face another assassin. The Empress spoke of Kairos, the lost soldiers of Project Ghostlight, and the years Ethan had spent carrying the weight of victories no one was permitted to remember. Earth's government had released the sealed records after the coup, clearing his name and recognizing the members of his unit who had died. Their names appeared one by one among the artificial stars above the hall. Ethan looked up at them in silence. For years, he had believed remembering them meant remaining trapped in the war. Now their names were no longer buried in secret files or spoken only by frightened veterans. They belonged to history. "You are offered command of the Imperial Defense Fleet," Seraphine said, "and any title within my authority." Ethan glanced toward Lyssara. "Does Palace Servant remain available?" A ripple of laughter passed through the hall. Lyssara folded her arms. "Your performance was inconsistent. I saved your life repeatedly. You also damaged a crown case, a fountain, a council table, and one extremely expensive diplomatic cruiser." The fountain was suspicious. The Veyron ambassador made a bubbling sound that his translator interpreted as laughter. Ethan faced the Empress again. "I accept no command over the fleet. I have had enough of being turned into a weapon." The hall grew quiet, but Seraphine only nodded. "Then what do you choose?" He looked at Lyssara. "A position where honesty is useful, danger is occasional, and the person giving orders has learned patience." Lyssara raised one eyebrow. "That last requirement may be unrealistic." "I am willing to negotiate." Seraphine descended from the throne carrying a narrow band of living metal. It shifted in her hands, forming the insignia of a royal protector, then reshaping itself into the emblem of an equal consort. "My daughter was punished because she believed rank determined worth," the Empress said. "You were hidden because others believed worth could be owned. You have both learned otherwise." Lyssara turned toward the council. Her voice remained strong, but Ethan saw the nervous movement of her ears. "When I chose Ethan Ward, I intended to embarrass him. I thought a human servant would make my punishment appear smaller." She looked at him. "Instead, he showed me how small I had become." No one laughed now. "He protected me when I did not deserve his loyalty. He challenged me when everyone else offered obedience. He taught me that leadership is not standing above others, but standing beside them when the sky is falling." "In fairness," Ethan said quietly, "the sky fell more than once. That earned the laughter she needed." Lyssara stepped closer. "I once called him my punishment. I was wrong. He became the greatest reward of my life." She offered him her hand, not as a princess commanding a servant, but as a woman asking an equal. Ethan took it. The living metal flowed around both their wrists, linking their insignias for a moment before separating into matching bands. Across the empire, citizens cheered. Above them, the 9 moons resumed their proper orbit at last, projecting not conquered worlds or ancient victories, but images of Earth, Vera, Asterion, and dozens of allied civilizations signing a new mutual defense accord. In the years that followed, Lyssara became known not for her pride, but for dismantling the traditions that had once protected it. She opened the imperial academies to common citizens, replaced hereditary council seats with elected ones, and appointed Lord Vial to lead military reform after publicly admitting his ancient proposal had contained several excellent ideas. He framed the apology. Ethan never returned fully to war. He trained protectors from many worlds, teaching them that survival depended less on strength than attention, restraint, and knowing when to distrust decorative fountains. A memorial to Ghost Command was built on Earth, not as a celebration of battle, but as a warning against those who treated soldiers as tools. Late one evening, long after the ceremony, Ethan and Lyssara stood on a palace balcony beneath the real stars. A rebuilt sky pavilion floated safely in the distance, its stabilizers checked by 3 independent systems and 1 deeply paranoid human. "Do you regret choosing me?" Ethan asked. Lyssara rested her head against his shoulder. "Constantly." He looked down at her. She smiled. "But only because you still reorganize my library. The unstable authors were spreading. They are books. That is how it begins." Her laughter drifted into the night as starships crossed the sky above them. Once, she had believed punishment meant being forced to stand beside someone beneath her. Now she understood that love had begun the moment she discovered no one truly stood beneath anyone. And Ethan, who had spent years as a ghost among the living, finally stopped searching every shadow for the next war. For the first time in either of their lives, the future did not feel like a battlefield. It felt like home,